Greeting, Earthlings. We have now taken over your radio.
Mike Schaefer.
See, I would argue, because I like to argue.
We all underestimated how hard it is to, one, win college football games, and two, transition and take over a program.
Mike Schaefer.
I was trying to kindly tell Mr. Bishop the Vikings have a chance to surprise some people, and I think that they could even win the division.
Mike Schaefer.
It doesn't seem like the kind of book where they would be hooked on meth. That got dark.
Mike Schaefer.
Well, while we are on our apology tour, Josh apologizing on behalf of the program.
For what?
For besmirching the good name of Sir Yacht.
Oh, yes.
I now want to take this moment to apologize on behalf of the program for not believing our next guest that the Vikings were on a collision course with at least 0-5. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mike Schaefer of Husker 24/7. Schaefer, on behalf of the program, who laughed at your pessimism last week.
We're sorry.
We're sorry.
It's hard for me to take this as a genuine apology when it's in the same breath as Sir Yacht, who no one could have any condolences for. If a moron throws enough stuff against the wall, eventually something's going to stick, as we learned with Chip Brown and every expansion story he wrote. And so, with Sir Yacht, it was the same thing. If you predict every weekend between now and December, 19th, he was going to get it right at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't think that anyone owes Sir Yacht an apology, but you gentlemen certainly owe an apology to me. The Minnesota Vikings are what we thought they were. Excuse me. They are what I thought they were, and that is bad.
So what about this then? In honor of both the Vikings and Sir Yacht, what if I say that the Vikings will win a Super Bowl someday? Can I be right about that eventually?
Yeah, I think that you could be. You don't get credit for it when it happens.
No, I called it.
Since it's not going to happen before the sun burns out. Frankly, I don't think you're going to be correct anyways, unless they figure out how to move the game of football to Mars, and then you've got a little bit of an issue there.
Gravity.
But there's no stadiums. I mean,
yeah.
that's a concern. What about the training? If you weigh less in space, how does that work in terms of the strength and conditioning? I don't know if Nebraska's space law program has worked on that yet. For when everything needs to move off of planet Earth. But that's, we don't have to get into that. That's only a few years down the line.
Just a few.
All right. So, we've buried the lead now.
There's a lead?
Yes, there is a lead. There's a lead. We might have blown it, but we came back last night. By the way, thanks for.
I don't understand when your team loses 7 games in a row. The only joy you can take is that at one point it looked like they were almost going to win a game.
It did. I admit I was a little upset in the 9th inning last night when I was already looking ahead and going, oh boy, a 5-game lead. But took a little longer, but all good. So I don't know how you look at it, Schaefer. I read the news today from the Big Ten. I'm approaching this with a great degree of caution in terms of, getting all this through. What did you think of the Big Ten's parameters, the percentages, how they're going to do everything? Did the Big Ten create a system that gives them an easy escape if they decide they don't want to play anymore? Or is this a full speed ahead, great plan for finishing a 8+1 game season?
I don't know if it's a great plan, but it's a plan, and a plan is better than no plan, which is where the Big Ten had been for basically, 5 months. So I guess I view that as progress. I didn't, and I know that you and our mutual friend and Wang Nacho's participant, Jack Mitchell, were wading very deep into the medical minutia to try to really kind of understand that. I didn't go so far deep into it because I think that we will find out pretty quickly, with someone like the University of Wisconsin, if they're able to come back and start practicing football here in a week or so. And then, there's going to be other schools where this pops up. And I just think that they set forth parameters that they felt like mitigated risk as much as possible, or at least gave them the opportunity that if games weren't going to be played, that they could point to that as the reason for why. I guess I'm just the way I sort of view it is we have a date of which the season starts for the third time, and this is probably I think the most optimistic we could be about where they're going to be. I don't know how many games Nebraska is going to actually get in an 8-game schedule and an 8-game sprint, and that's probably the thing that I'm most perturbed by, if you will, is that all of this has to be completed in 8 weeks. You don't give yourself any sort of break. If we can go all the way back and complain about the first time to cancel the season, what they did is they effectively boxed themselves in. And, I don't know if it's a guarantee that you're going to get 8 games across the league for everybody. And the one thing that I would caution is, if Nebraska doesn't play in a game, it doesn't mean that the numbers spiked here in Lincoln or anything. It could just mean that the opponent that they play is unable to play. And, we've seen that at the high school level with Bellevue West, who has not had a single issue with COVID-19, and yet they've only played 1 game in 3 weeks. And so there's no guarantee, even if a place like Nebraska is set up to play well. I'm very curious, like let's say if there's 4 teams and 2 of them have to drop out, would they do what we're seeing at the high school level where, if it's early enough in the situation, a school just decides that they're going to travel to Lincoln so they can at least get a game in? Are they willing to be that open with the schedule? Those are the sort of things that I guess I want to see play out or figure out. Or if it's just very much, well, you're not on the schedule, that's that, and move forward.
Schaefer, at what point in the last month did you see this as being something that was actually going to happen? I mean, we started off the conversation by talking about Sir Yacht. It very early on it was, March, and then it was January, and then it was December, and then it was October. Did you think that something like this was actually realistic at any point until the last week or so?
I really thought that the Thanksgiving thing is what they wanted to do because I felt like they wanted to go along with the Pac-12. And then it just became increasingly apparent that they were going to be left in the cold, so to speak, with the ACC and the SEC and the Big 12. You had games each of the last 2 weekends. And we can't even say they went off without a hitch because we've seen, Arkansas State was down 8 key players and they beat Kansas State last week. BYU is already having to cancel games after their blowout win against Navy. I mean, there's still a lot to be figured out. I don't know if just because this is on the schedule, anybody should feel significantly better. But I do think that from the Big Ten's perspective of they felt like everyone was going to follow suit. And then when the Pac-12 was the only one that did, to save their brand, they had to make this move. I really feel that way. And I'm curious why this was what was decided on, if it's solely to placate the idea that you have 1, maybe 1.5 teams that could play in the college football playoff versus trying to give yourself more weeks and more time to make this really happen starting later. But I think that it's okay. I don't know if this is a route that I would have preferred, but this is what we have, and we'll see how it goes going forward.
In terms, Schaefer, of why they made this decision, to come back after they decided to postpone, how much of it, because we spent time talking today about testing and the literal COVID part of it, how much of it though is the power conferences that have gotten off the ground, on top of also the playoff selection date getting pushed back to when they decided to do so on December 20th? Because remember, when that announcement was first made, there was a theory that the other leagues were saying, hey, Big Ten, if you guys want to join the party, you still can, because look, we're pushing this back. How much do you think that played a part in this move?
I think it could have. I think that certainly opened the door for Ohio State to get louder in this whole mix. I mean, if you remember the first few days after the cancellation, Ryan Day was out there putting together his own plan for what spring football could look like. And then they quickly pivoted. And I don't know if we've kind of discussed what it was that changed the pivot for Ohio State, but I think Josh might have hit on it a little bit, is that once the college football playoff became a real thing that could happen, Ohio State didn't want to be left out of that. And their attitude, I guess, if you would, changed from compliant to defiant. And I think that certainly played a role in increased attention. The medical thing and the rapid testing, it's sort of interesting because, as you guys well know, there's other entities that have had rapid testing available for a while. Like this isn't groundbreaking new things that that the Big Ten has put together here. They've had this stuff available for several months. It's what makes all of it frustrating. Like, if this is what it took to get the ball, to get the ball rolling, where were these conversations in June, in July, and everything else? And it's just, it goes back to how I feel originally as a Big Ten absolutely had members that did not want to play in any circumstance, and then have had to do an about face. And I still think you have programs, Rutgers doesn't look like they're remotely excited about this decision. I somewhat wonder where Northwestern fits into it as well, but they're trying to save face as much as they can. And let's hope that they even have an opportunity to put a lot of their product out there, because they didn't give themselves a lot of outs, really, with the way the schedule's set up.
So, Schaefer, on that point, should there be at least a little bit of concern that obviously Nebraska is going to try to do everything it can to keep its guys on the straight and narrow, and Ohio State's going to try to do everything it can to keep its guys on the straight and narrow, but that there might be folks who lax a little bit in some of their own personal team protocols and get a little sloppy, and thus they have to drop off, thus maybe causing chaos? I mean, do we have to be worried about something like that?
Well, I think, do we have to be worried? No, because we're not the ones running their program. But I think that's a real thing that can occur when you're talking about college kids. I mean, and there's going to be a point this season, and I don't know what team it's going to be or what conference or where, but we're going to hear more and more about a team that had played 4 games thinking everything had gone fine for them. One party, one event happens, one on campus happening, and it could shift the whole dialogue of what happens for that team for multiple weeks. And so that's the reality of a highly spread virus in the way that this thing is. I don't know if there are enough safety nets that you can do aside from what the NBA and the NHL have done with actually physically placing teams in an area where they can't do anything else or go anywhere else. I think that you have to address these things as they pop up, and you have to hope that people have a shared value of, okay, we want to go to this bar or we want to go to this party, but we know that we can't. We know that our values have to be placed in a certain way. And as society, a lot of us have done that for months now. And so that's just decisions that people have to make at a personal level. And yeah, I mean, there could be some people that make a decision that ruin things for an Ohio State, but they're going to have to rectify that with the people that they're close to if they choose to do it, if and when that comes about.
So on that same point, Josh and I are both in agreement that that Nebraska, from a mental standpoint, should be in a really good place right now, because obviously their coaches have been fighting hard to get this day to happen. And thus, I think you probably have a lot of players who are still very much locked in as much as they can be, not going through the usual rigors of a 20-hour week. I'm sure now they're ramping back up to that. But conversely, a place like, and we picked on Minnesota because, well, we like to pick on PJ Fleck, but Minnesota was very compliant. They were very, we're canceled. No big deal. We support everything. And you just wonder how the trickle-down effect from administration to coach to players affects a team's mindset. Do you think that Nebraska is in a better place mentally as a football team today because they have been working towards this moment for so long, while other schools might not be all there because they may have already started to kind of mentally check out?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And it's something where, Nebraska has had to fight that malaise too, like anybody would have. I mean, if you think about what it's like to have been a player these last few weeks where you're on campus, and we've seen guys like Keyshawn Green leave, and we don't know the exact reason, but it's hard for me to imagine that occurs if football happened on September 5th or if you were working towards a game. But you have to think that their mindset is pretty good. You have to think that, you had 8 players involved in a lawsuit, and you have to assume that they were hoping that this was going to be the eventual outcome. So therefore they're putting their same sort of drive and energy behind preparing. Now, what that actually means as far as getting onto the field, every team is going to have the same amount of run up of the day that they found out that this was going to happen to being able to practice and where they are with things. I mean, the thing with Nebraska that they have going for it is that they have a lot of seniors returning. They have a veteran team. They don't have a ton of new faces that have to be worked in or expected to work in, but you're hoping that guys emerge throughout your season, certainly on the defensive side of the ball. But I think, yeah, mentally they're going to be in a good spot. They have a coach that I think has probably looped them in as much as he's been looped in. And the expectation there, Mario Verduzco said this a while ago, but every day is game day. Like, that's the expectation he has for Adrian Martinez, whether it's June 1st, October 1st, January 1st, any of those days. I mean, the expectation is you're always working, you're always trying to get better. And so I think that it gets easier to be in that mentality when you have something to work for like they do now with this, October 24th game, whoever that might be.
Yeah, and Schaefer, kind of along those lines, one of the theories that I had yesterday in regards to all of this is that the players should never feel like, or maybe this is now the most that the players have ever felt like Frost has been in their corner. Like, you look at the last couple of years and, he's talked about the culture before he was there. He's talked about the way in which they worked out, the hoodie incident last year in Minnesota. Not that he was like a bad human being to them, but he has taken some shots at how things were done or how things were being done. Right now, if you're a player, shouldn't they all feel like, wow, he is really in our camp, because no matter what happens on the field this year, we could be a 500 team and he still wants us to play football. Like, kind of going off of what John just said, like, I really think that this should be a nice kick in the pants for the entire psyche of this place. Like, they fought for this and they're going to get it.
Well, but the thing is, they have to make it also stand up. Like, if they come out and they go 2-6 and they play undisciplined football for the third year in a row, what does it matter what their mentality was on September 16th, as they got the news of this? I mean, I think that there should be a level of excitement around that program that they're going to get the opportunity to write some of the narratives about them, to be able to change the way that we talk about Nebraska football, to be able to change the way that they were a joke. I mean, so part of why, if you can't be motivated now as a Nebraska football player, coming off of your head coach putting his neck out there and basically saying this is the kind of place where we want to play football and we think we can play football, to being a punching bag for much of the last 6 weeks, these guys should be more motivated than ever. But motivation is only a fraction of it. They have to be prepared, and they have to go out and execute and do their job. And not to sound like Bo Pelini in 2013, but that's essentially where they have lacked as much as anything. I mean, hoodies on the sidelines pregame isn't why you're lining up in the wrong spot in a critical fourth down as a senior. I mean, that's just not the problem in my mind. It should be Mark Pelini on that super instead of Bo Pelini. So I still think, I think that they have a lot of reason for enthusiasm. And quite frankly, what sucks to me is I kind of thought they had a team, and this is where, maybe I was overly optimistic about Nebraska's chances this year, whether it was a 10-game schedule or the 12-game schedule. They kind of had a team that could have snuck up on some people a little bit, or could have exceeded some expectations. And so I still think they have that in them, but they got to go out and show it. And their psyche and the mentality and the motivation won't be just enough. They have to go physically go play good football too.
What do you think of the schedule? It's an 8+1, which means 8 regular season, then this Champions Week, I think they're calling it. 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, etc. Do you like that?
I mean, I love the +1. I love the idea that everybody gets an extra game, and especially in a year where there's not a bowl game, and people might say, well, what do I care if Nebraska's playing Indiana and both teams went 3-5? But at the same time, in a year in which we've seen your sports go away, I can't imagine being someone complaining about getting to see your team one extra time. And then in addition to that, the one thing that I hate no bye weeks. I hate this sprint. I hate that there's nothing. They don't allow it. If you have to drop a game, you're not going to be able to get that back on the schedule. But it'll keep us interested, and that's a march. There hasn't been a whole lot of times that I can think of where Nebraska's played, at least since I've been covering the team, 8 straight weeks in a row. I think there's usually, what
was it 2 years ago?
The first Mike Riley year, right? They didn't have a bye week until before Iowa. So they played a lot.
That's one.
What was it 2 weeks ago when the Akron game got bounced?
Right. And that's another one.
But,
at least that first one was scheduled that way. Normally in the schedule, the Akron one, I mean, you really can't do much about that. That's just sort of the way that it worked out. And quite frankly, Bethune-Cookman was a bye week for many of the guys on that team.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're right. That 2015 season felt like a slog for a lot of reasons. But you get to that 7th, 8th game. I mean, I've seen people speculate that, and I fully believe Nebraska's getting Ohio State and Penn State as their crossover games. I've seen people speculate that those would be your week 1, week 2. If I'm a Nebraska fan, I want Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin as early as possible, and then put those other teams as far back as possible. Because I just think your best chance of getting those wins is going to be early in the season when people are kind of figuring things out. And I just think from a depth standpoint, Nebraska's got a lot of upperclassmen. They've got a lot of guys to work in, and they have a lot of young guys. But it could thin out in a hurry at some positions if they get banged up and you're playing, week 6, 7. You haven't had a break yet, and guys are still playing through it, but they're playing at 80% versus 100. It can change it for a team like Nebraska.
Yeah, Schaefer, along those lines, before we let you go, we're what, 2-3-ish weeks into this weird college football season so far. Is there a takeaway that you would have that the coaches could apply to Nebraska? I mean, I guess something as simple as, games are going to be weird and strange because we've seen we saw some Power 5 teams go down to a bunch of Sun Belt teams all in the Big 12 over the weekend. Like, I guess I've just been trying to watch these games knowing that the Big 12 or the Big 10 is probably going to play, thinking, okay, what takeaways could there be for Nebraska that Frost could really hone in on in the ramp up to the start of the season?
People may not love this, and this isn't why, Scott Frost caught national attention anyways. It was for their very up-tempo offense. But I would think in a year like this, simplicity is going to be really important. And if you can find a couple things that you do really well and you can just do those really well throughout games, and what I'm talking about is if they can play power running game with Dedrick Mills and build everything else off of that, rather than trying to be multiple and trying to create guesswork, I think that could have a real winning strategy to a year like 2020, where you might be inserting parts on the fly because guys could just be dropping off or whatever else. And so the simpler you keep it, the easier it is to bring in somebody from, off the first string. And so I don't know. And I kind of had hoped that that's the way that Nebraska was going to play this year anyways. And you let Adrian Martinez kind of ease into things. You let your wide receivers ease into things and you play through that running game. And I think if Nebraska does that, they can be a more successful team this year than what we've seen in the past.
Bring back the option.
All right.
Formation.
Trivia time, boys. When's the last time, name the year, the last time Nebraska opened its season in the month of October?
Oh, God.
The last time the season opened in October.
Did they play Omaha YMCA in 1887?
I will give you a hint. It is more recent than that.
62. No, 61.
Schaefer, 48?
Yeah.
Schaefer's closer. 1943.
That'd be around World War II time, right?
Yeah.
1943 was the last time Nebraska opened its season in the month of October. It was the 2nd of October against Minnesota.
Nice. Let's do that again.
This is going to match the latest start in Nebraska football history since 1892, when they opened on October the 24th.
There you go.
Against Illinois. The very first Nebraska game was the 27th of November, 1890. And then the next year, they opened on Halloween.
All right. So there's precedent for it.
Yes.
Perfect.
By the way, the 1890 Huskers played all of 2 games that year. They played Thanksgiving Day against Omaha YMCA. And then on St. Valentine's Day against Doane.
And they went 2-0.
They went 2-0.
National champs, baby.
There you go. Nice.
Yeah, I think people probably felt like Nebraska was going to overlook the Omaha YMCA and looking forward to that St. Valentine's Day massacre. But no, they showed up to play.
It did indeed.
All right, so give me a preview tonight. I memean, I got John Lester going for me. Do you know who's pitching tonight for the Tribe?
Believe it is Aaron Savali, one of their 75, 24-year-old right-handed pitchers that just fill up the strike zone and just hope that they can keep the other team to 2 runs or less, and that the Indians' offense only needs to score 3 runs, which is about what they average per game at this point. If they give up more than 2 runs, then those pitchers are basically just pretty much put on the trade block right away at that point, so they can bring in more 4th outfielders and bullpen help.
Schaefer, I don't know who has it worse right now, you or Stibbs.
Why is it bad for Stibbs? Aren't the Mariners fighting for like the 8th playoff spot?
Oh, yeah,
Stibbs?
baseball.
Well, they're not that far out, right?
He's
No, but I also just don't care.
He's talking about football. He's talking about the
Yeah.
Chiefs.
Yeah. He's bummed about the Chiefs. He's bummed about the Broncos.
Well, I mean, what can you do? You only get so many timeouts, and sometimes teams like the Cowboys and the Broncos choose not to use theirs effectively.
All right, bye. Shane, have a great day.
The Vikings don't have to think about it at all because they're generally trailing by enough that their timeouts don't matter.
Way past time for a break. Sorry, we got to go.
That's fine.
All right.
Thanks, Schaefer.
Have a good week, Schaefer.
Have a great week. There he is,
Thank
Mike Schaefer. He joins us every Wednesday at 3:45. We're less than an hour away from Dumb Debates, and Eric Edholm's still coming.
I didn't mean to bounce out. I
Josh is
forgot.
quick to get out of that
Did
stream.
we wait until the commercial?
That's okay, because no one wants to see his crappy Cowboys hat, because there's the winners right there. The Los Angeles Rams. Notice that my son got me the good hat,
It is the good one.
not
sharp, man.
not the weird LA logo. And I'm glad they put the Ram head
It's
at,
cool.
at the 50-yard line.
Same Z's.
There are a couple things that I want to get to next before we talk to Eric Edholm, who's joining us on the dot at 4:30 today. So we can do that next.
All right.
I got 2 things for you.
Is this your hot take, maybe hot take segment? Are we
No,
doing that
that's
again?
that's on Tuesday.
That's just on Tuesday?
That's just on Tuesdays.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do that next Tuesday. And remember, I got one marinating. Got one marinating in the oven right now. It's gonna be in the oven for a long time.
You don't marinate in the oven.
I do. I do both
You
cooking
marinate
and marinating.
before you put it in the oven. Or
You've never eaten my cooking, John.
You know how much
It's
he likes
delicious.
vinegar. He's constantly marinating things
He's
in vinegar.
constantly he's got the apple cider vinegar and he's just pouring it on there. Just
I'm doing it right. It's there. It's there right now.
Oh, all right. Coming back with more in a minute. 16:20 The Zone.